Hello and welcome to Happy Hour. It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. Hopefully the audio issues have sorted themselves out and this take sticks. My name is Rob, aka Lantern Noir. We are joined in chat by at least one person, Crimson Howling. Glad to have you here. And with me is the other co-host.
Graybeard of Graybeard Tavern.
So how has your week been? Before we get into talking D&D, let's do our weekly recap of interesting gaming stuff.
All right. So Thursday, we are closing in. I know I keep saying it, but our DM keeps stretching it out. Closing in on we love you, Endor, if ever you're listening to this. Our superheroes mask game, the Green Sun is over on Indoor Adventures on Thursdays. And yeah, we started to reveal that my character Cody, aka Golden Gauntlet, is his love interest and his rival are getting together, and he's going to be crushed. But
as one is
also understanding, because Cody is really growing into his own. He's growing up. He's gonna be a superhero, hence the superhero voice. But and so then let's see, take two. Take six. Saturday, me and the Grognards just hung out and talked politics because we had a last minute cancellation. So we are in our last two episodes of the story arc in there, and so they are very soon going to find out what the deal is with the 10-year-old girl they plucked out of a cryo chamber and floating in space, and what her mysterious secret powers are. Last we left them, there were invisible assailants around them, and they couldn't figure out who or what they were on a desert planet. So that was that. Sunday we played Zweihander with the English, mostly English Canadian crew that I play with, and we all got our second profession, because Zweihander, you don't have classes, you have professions and skills and stuff. And so my berserker is now a berserker / sellsword. And as a sellsword, his trait for being a sellsword is he does not take serious wounds. You cannot seriously wound him. You have to pretty much kill him or he keeps fighting. So that's pretty awesome combined with the berserker, and the story and the sound work is just amazing. HHatOTT is a sound engineer, so the background noises are always doing stuff, and he brings the sound up and drops it and stuff, and so it's an amazing game. And I definitely a HHatOTT, TALE. Go check out his Twitter. I played with him on, it's now Penny for a Tale. It used to be Encounter Roleplay, and we did an entire series there, over there with those guys, and it was fantastic. So definitely go check that out if ever you want some steampunky goodness, because that's what we played. We played a zombie apocalypse with vampires game, basically, and that was a good time with them. That was ages past, but you can watch that on YouTube.
A sellsword
what else?
and a weapons merchant are basically the same. I suppose if you break the language down directly, yes, but
a literal translation.
So that was,
and then Grifflands on Sunday morning. Of course, as Smith, the character you love to hate, died. He died.
No.
Oh, he got into like a big boss battle, and a giant snail thing just ate his face off. By like 2 cards I lost this. I was supposed to convince the guards that I was supposed to be there, and just barely just did not have the cards to do it right. So I had to fight the guards, and I just wasn't strong enough after fighting the guards to take on the monster because they killed my friend. Anyway, so Grifflands was a lot of fun. As is always. So we've decided, because we still have time, because Darkest Dungeon 2 is not out yet. We're gonna start. We're gonna start again, and we're gonna play all 3 characters all the way through. So, and that's it for my gaming week. How did you do?
That should be fun. Well, Wednesday night we started the little bridge game I'm running to give my Wednesday night usual group a break. And it, I mean, again, it worked out. I actually got a text from from Tiffany, who's one of the 2 players, and she's down in the same part of the neck of the woods that Barely Molly's from, and they were able to meet up and shake hands with each other and have lunch together. A, because they're actually finally in the same place at the same time, and B, they're both fully vaccinated, and then some. So yeah, it was the most normal thing I think that's happened, or could happen in the streaming community. That idea of like, let's have a meetup somewhere. And it's really exciting for me to think about, because it's so close to, like, I'm already starting to do okay, so when we get to the fall con season, which ones are we thinking we might all kind of gaggle on that are going to be sent? Like, I'm not ready for Gen Con. It's too big. I'm not ready for Origins. There's baggage. But I'm like, okay, where can we all meet up? Maybe. Which will be a lot of fun. But anyway, so that was the Wednesday night game. Was a ton of fun. There was some really great role playing, some really great storytelling. Some really good detective work. There's a lot of, like, I introduced the captain of the guard, and I was expecting a really long scene with him. And I actually wrote him in as being deaf because I really wanted to riff off of that from the Dragon Prince. And it was like the least, like, he had maybe 3 minutes of screen time because the party had figured everything out. They didn't have to ask him anything. Like, they've got, okay, we got this clue, we got this clue, we got this clue. We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And off they go. And it was really, really fun. And then Saturday was supposed to be the Ravenloft one-shot, and I got a phone call over Discord from one of the 4 players at 2 in the afternoon going, so turns out my fiance didn't tell me, but we have a major dinner with her family tonight. So on 4-hour notice, I'm asking around going, okay, what can we do with this? How can we do this? And would you believe that Danae Keener of DanaeKeener.com was free and was able to sit in and fill the party out. And it was just an absolute blast. Every time I've run this Ravenloft module one-shot, I learned a little more about pacing and making it fit at the table within the time limits, because there's just so much stuff you want to do. And it was weird because I got to the end and I'm like, I had so much prep work that never got touched because they just didn't go those directions.
Right.
Which makes me even more excited for the next time I say, okay, let's do it again.
Right.
Because if it's a completely new group, I know to go a little faster through the exposition. And then it's like, who knows where they're going to go with it? Because it's a flow chart. So they go where they go. And I've already figured out the twist that'll make the final battle different than this last one. But it was really fun. And then my Sunday night game continued with its Curse of Strahd campaign. They've gone out of Vallaki. They're having a great time. It was great to get together with all of them. It's a fun group to hang out with. And then I'm on summer vacation officially as of yesterday. So I am now like, do I want to stream more? Do I want to start another D&D game? Do I want to start a midday game? Something a little more European schedule friendly.
Right. Yeah.
Or do I want to like just keep my night schedule the way it is, or it's weird. I played like MechWarrior 5 for an hour today, and I'm like, I'm not streaming this. Am I really a streamer?
I'm so there with you. I told you I used to do I think we called it Sci-Fi Saturday or something, and I used to only play like MechWarrior or sci-fi, cyberpunk, whatever games. And it was really funny because I had an early time slot, like 8 a.m. time slot. And with, my general Vikingness and, the tavern, the way it is, people just always Germany, Norway, Sweden would pop in like every week. And I've got friends who still show up to my Sunday show, my Sunday morning show, because it's late there, later in the day there, and so they still hang out with us. But for a long time we joked, Saturday mornings I'm #1 in Norway. Because I would pop up on their Twitch things, because I'd have 8 or 10 people watching me, and at that time slot that was enough usually with what I was playing to get me on the board in those European countries. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah,
Pretty funny.
it's a lot of fun. Okay, so before we hit our topic of the week, if you have, before we get too far, remind everybody that we are part of the Inverse Genius family of podcasts and content. So if you want to provide feedback or suggestions for a future episode, we happily welcome them. You can reach us at the Old Timer Tavern. I think that's what it is. Yeah, Old Timer Tavern at gmail.com, or at the Inverse Genius Facebook group, where you can also find all the other great content creators in the Inverse Genius family. There's an amazing group of people that do everything from board games to role-playing games to video games to just nerding out. Yes, I saw you guys. I couldn't, my schedule didn't line up right. I had stuff happen with my wife and I were kind of both having lazy days yesterday. But yes, Enceladsaurus and Third Tier are starting a podcast together. Their first episode, I believe, was yesterday. So huge props to them for joining the podcasting community.
Woo!
And if it takes off and you feel confident with it, I can get you in touch with a great team of content creators, because they are amazingly fun people to hang out with. So this week's topic is our own topic. It kind of came out of last week. We were talking pirates and cannons, and then we said, well, wait a minute. What kind of tech do you see in a fantasy RPG, and how do you, as a DM, resolve really inventive players? And I kind of feel like that's where we should start.
Right.
And kind of go from there. I want to actually lead in with some context from where I'm coming from with a lot of this, which is I used to do historical reenacting. I was part of the King's or 8th Regiment of Foot reenacted out of the Detroit, Michigan area. And that is its actual title. The King's or 8th Regiment was its full title. You would see that like on their official colors. And they still exist in a form. Because there's a garrison in Ontario that traces its roots back to the original Kings or 8th. So we used to bump into things where you would feel very clever about doing something a certain way in camp because you had limited tools. You had the tools of the 18th century. And someone would say, are you sure you should be doing that? And we go, well, we're using period tools.
Right.
Well, is that how they did it? Well, we don't have any documentation that they did it this way, but they could have.
Exactly.
and it's that kind of a thing where it gets a little bit within reenacting. It gets a little bit weird when you say things like they could have if they had just thought of it, and it would have caught on if anyone had. But no one did.
Right.
Therefore, that's not what you're supposed to be doing in camp. And that's I kind of flavor a lot of my thought process with technology in fantasy games very similarly.
Right.
That we have that I kind of use as an angle as I come into it. What's your like overarching rule when someone says, "What's our tech level for this game?" Where's your starting point?
So until a few years ago, basically, until I start running for kids, as my daughters were growing up, and we had a group of like 3 dads and like 6 kids. And when I started DMing for them, the gloves came off, and we were on the ice and just going at it. Who cares? Whatever. Until then, I was there were 2 camps. There was Warhammer camp, and yes, dwarves have guns because they're dwarves, and everything else was very Tolkien, on my other camp. It was because I too was a reenactor. As you can see, my armor is right there. um, uh, but we did dark period. We were actually Germans conscripted to the Roman auxiliaries, and we belonged to the Society for Creative Anachronism. We were a unit. We were interesting because we were Germanic, we didn't have the same shields or tabards. Everybody was their own thing because we're frippin' barbarians, right? And so we used to have a really good time with it. We were under the camp of Blue Rose was our official SCA camp. And it was a gorgeous place at Penzic. There was the guy who started it was the guy who taught my brother blacksmithing. And the camp itself, he was a landscaper, full time, and blacksmith part time. And the camp is beautiful, gorgeous place, and hence we used to do all the stuff. We would build chairs that were period. We had my brother blacksmithed a replica Viking grooming kit. So a little wound iron ring with scissors and tweezers and an earwax scoop. Anyone who says Vikings didn't have we're just sloppy and didn't care, they did there was whalebone combs and stuff. We of course had no whalebone, thank you environment. But yeah, so for the longest time, and I come from martial arts background and stuff, so all that played in for decades with me. And it wasn't until, like I said, until the kids and running the kids group that I really started to loosen up, and sky's the limit. At this point, I enjoy one of the games I ran recently had it had pickle barrels with twin scimitars. Oh, they're not there. But I had twin scimitars where the blades of the barrels, and these orcs were flying these barrels with twin scimitar propellers run by magic, and just airships, whatever. Let's just sky's the limit. But that's only been recently. So it really, because again, playing with the kids, I really started to just sure, sky's the limit. Because the TV shows and stuff that people are growing up with now are, Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. They, Super Son, and then there's godlike powers, and Pokemon, blam, and now I have a dinosaur kaiju that fights for me, and that's what they're growing up with. So that's kind of where their fantasy levels are. So
yeah, well, that makes some sense. I'm thinking using that as a bridge for when you lay the foundation for what you want in your world. So if you're running a game and you're like, okay, what's going to be normal in this world? What's our tech level? I have noticed that in most fantasy settings that we're seeing in pop culture, they're really heavy in steampunk as an underlay, not the classic late 19th century steampunk, but just Renaissance steampunk. Where if they want to do something technological, it's run by steam or magnets, or there's some kind of Leyden jar system where it bottles lightning and they pull it out later when they need it. I'm thinking it was is it Stardust? Was the Neil Gaiman book that got converted to the movie?
And there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of them. There was Compass and Stardust.
Yeah, but they had the lightning pirates.
Yeah.
That were out capturing lightning basically in sort of Leyden jars, which were the precursor of the battery or the capacitor, which anybody that's taken intro physics, you've seen one. or maybe built one if depending on how adventurous your instructors were. And those really weren't that far removed from the Renaissance period. Like
Right.
as we were coming out of the Dark Ages into the Renaissance, this is where science leapt to. We didn't know what to do with it yet, but we were getting there fast. Although that said, fast being from the Earth history point of view, several hundred years till we got to applications.
Right.
I mean, we had Leyden jars, and then it took us a long time to get to the telegraph machine. So that's another thing I think that gets lost in some of this. Well, it's not that big of a jump. But I tend to fall in the category of thinking in terms of where's the impetus to invent something technological when there's magic. And I feel like magic changes so much of our tech conversations.
I think that, again, to use the Eberron ArcanePunk thing. Okay, here let's do a little history on that. When Eberron was first being talked about, hate, so much hate. I hated Eberron, hated. And again, I was in the middle of my reenacting and stuff, and we were moving into like third edition, and our Tolkien brains were so angry when the third edition books came out, and all of a sudden there were double weapons, and all the armor had spikes on it, and as actual armor crafters, like my brother made my armor, type thing, as those type of historic people, third edition was an affront to us. And then Eberron was even like off the rails. There's trains run by elementals. It was painful. It was just painful. But now looking at it, I'm like, if that's, again, I think that's really part of your session 0. The campaign I was running at home here, I gave out a session 0 form, and on it was, airships, yes, no, guns, yes, no, to get a feel for the table and see where people were at. And then, as under poetic DM license, if someone did have a gun, it would be a singular thing that NPC had to break the rules and to be a surprise and to push the boundaries. Because
that's where some of my historical background gets me in trouble, because I tend to take the approach of, if you're going to start to flirt with tech, and not magic supported tech, I really want to look at, well, do you know what it takes to make a matchlock or a wheel lock or a flint lock work? And I think one of the things that's really underrepresented in the lore, and it's weird because part of me is like, this is a cinematic game. If someone wants to use a light crossbow and we just reskin it as a firearm, that doesn't change any of the mechanics.
Right.
So it's not a big deal until it becomes a big deal.
Right.
But things like matchlocks, and so if you want to go realistic on it, matchlocks and flintlocks and wheel locks were all profoundly unreliable up until they'd been in use for a very long time. Matchlocks in particular suffered from all kinds of things, from the slow wick going out, to having it not ignite the main charge, to having too large of a hole between your pan and your main charge, which could then cause it to either backfire or to simply not do what it was supposed to do. Rifling was incredibly difficult to work into the picture. A breech loader in 1790 was considered one of oh my gosh, they've built breech loading rifles, and that was like super high tech.
The rotary cannon of the day.
Yes, and fun anecdote. One of the early rifles developed by the British They had deployed a captain and a company of sharpshooters with them, and one of them had lined up on Washington in a relatively early battle, and he couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger because, according to his diaries or his accounts after the fact, Washington was too regal to be taken from the field so dishonorably as by a sniper.
Right.
So, but again, too, that's like the kind of thing where it's weird because part of me wants to say, even though I realize I run games that are really cinematic. You know, we don't track ammo unless it's important. We don't track rations unless it's important. So why do I care about being realistic about firearms? But for some reason, I do.
Yep. I so understand. Particularly, and I think it was in 3.5, but it's hard to remember because it was so many splat books. But there were guns in 3.5. I believe in one of the core books, but it was suddenly they tried to make guns more like guns, and so it was okay. It would go through armor, and then there was DRs, and the mechanics got wonky. So in 5th, in the DMG, they have guns and grenades and stuff listed, like if you want to do a futures crossover or whatever, but it all just jumps right into, okay, yep, you still got a hit, it still does damage, and it's not lightsaber technology. They aren't magic weapons, they just are, they're pretty much reskinned heavy crossbows.
Exactly. And third tier does bring up that in the Wednesday night game, his elven artificer does pack a flintlock. And though that one, I feel like I'm almost ready to say it works the way it works because the artificer is also a magic class that somehow is channeling their magic into their constructs, and that's why she gets away with it.
Right.
And then Jackal's contribution is that tech is a balance to magic in their worlds. Good points about the mechanics. Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's a way to mechanically kind of like decide how much you want to allow the blacksmith and the people that work with them to catch up to the high mages. Because if you think about where a 5th level mage is in terms of ability to muck up the world compared to a 5th level fighter.
Right.
I mean, the 5th level fighter is a great fighter, but like wizards can do some scary ass crap. And that's where things get really dicey. And so I like the idea of there being a certain amount of ability to use that tech as you world build.
Right.
To see what you're going to do. And then third tier brings up a good point that in the 5th edition rulebook, there are black powder firearms.
Yep.
The twist is, and as we said before, a lot of that comes down to your session zeros, where you say, it may be in the book, but.
Yeah. So there's a graphic novel series out there by Zeb. Oh, it's gonna bug me. Can't remember his name.
Keep talking.
Anyway, it's called Skull Kickers, and it's got the classic dwarf, and then it's got a huge fighter guy who goes around with this little dwarf on their adventures, but he has 6 guns, and they're magic. They're just magic 6 guns. They shoot bullets. You never see them reload. It's just they're a magic thing. So I for years have wanted to play a kobold cowboy, and he has 6 guns, but they're just wands of magic missile. Like he never misses, he's got these pistols and he never misses, and he's this little kobold cowboy. And so I love that idea so much that I talked Wings into letting the wand of magic pistol appear in, she was playing she was running the Mines of Philander, the module that comes in the basic D&D book or box set. She was running that, but with a Wild West twist. And that was the magic item I wanted to see, was the golden pistol that never misses. And so that's what it was a wand of magic missile that never misses. And it had some, great name, like yeah, anyway, it was basically Spanish for the golden gun. But yeah,
Pistoles, I used to be able to do that.
Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, but that's one of the things. Basically, when the Artificer came into Unearthed Arcana, I was like, okay, yeah, it's over. As soon as the Artificer hits a real book, the age of ArcanePunk is going to be all upon us, with stuff like Full Metal Alchemist. And like I said, everybody who's in their 20s and stuff growing up and playing D&D now, that's the stuff they grew up with. And so that's where they're gonna think, and pets. Everybody wants a pet, and whether it's a steam powered monkey or a fuzzball with fangs, or whatever. So.
Was it the D&D cartoon where they made gunpowder at one point because they called it Dragon's Bane? I remember a cartoon as a kid. I want to say it was the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, because they had to deal with a dragon that wasn't Tiamat.
Yeah.
And Merlin, I think, as they came across an actual Merlin, not the other Merlin they came across. Mm-hmm. And he made gunpowder, but they called it Dragon's Bane.
Right.
Because that gets into that. I think, and the thing too, I would also put out there, speaking of the Artificer coming up, is that everything that's not Player's Handbook or DM's Guide, really we need to remember is in that optional rules category, where they lean very heavy in those forewords to say, we're not entirely sure if this is going to break the game.
Right.
So please be aware. This could break the game. We don't know. It might. And I like to think of the Artificer, as I said earlier, as being not so much an amazing engineer as a wizard with a need to make it look right.
Right.
Like,
right.
I had a character concept, actually, for a superhero. Her name was Gizmo. And her superpower was that she could invent just about anything that she needed to, given an ample time and equipment, without having to follow the rules of physics.
Nice.
So she could build a bio scanner, and she'd put the bells and the whistles and the lights on it, and the rays to read with, and all these things, and you'd be with handheld, you'd crank it up to get it running and stuff. And anybody who knew anything about science would look at it and go, I don't know what that is. That should you literally have bulbs in sockets that are not wired to anything, but they're lighting up, and it would work. And
remember, any significantly advanced science will appear to be magic.
Which was the opposite. That she really had magic. But I see Artificers very much in that, through that lens, where it's, you're not really developing high tech. Right. You're just obsessed with toys to the point where you need your toys to do your magic.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's almost like maybe there's a certain mental block where a wizard can say, okay, if I combine this rune with that rune, and I see this part of the weave, and I'm able to pull it this way and then twist it that way and then upend it over here, fire shoots out of my hands.
Right.
Whereas an Artificer goes, well, that seems like a lot of work. What if I just channel it into here, and then I spoot it out there, and I have a flamethrower?
Right.
But I only understand how to make it work.
Right. Yep.
And
I have two tanks on my back, and one has, frog spit, and one has gin in it. And and when I pump this up and hit the thing.
Well, but that gets us into a whole nother topic, because we haven't touched on cannons yet. We have to talk cannons at some point.
All right.
But before we even talk cannons, What do we do when the player says, yeah, don't drink the wrong tank in that case. I apologize for the offense. And if it's legitimate, please whisper me. I actually had an incident earlier today where someone made a relatively inappropriate, in my opinion, inappropriate joke in a chat. And when I said, "Hey, that wasn't cool," their response was, "Well, I'm really tough, thick-skinned about these kinds of things." And my next thought was, I don't care if you're thick-skinned. I'm the one that's offended. And then I made the mistake of saying, well, I'll just wait for the mod to sort this out. And then I looked back at the chat and went, oh, that was a mod who told that joke. Oh, well, that escalated quickly. But the tank thing, though, we as modern people living in a world where there's compulsory education through the age of majority know a lot more science and mathematics than a typical peasant needs to survive in a fantasy world. I mean, I'm not downplaying skilled trades. I'm not downplaying the knowledge base needed to be a successful blacksmith. You have to know a certain level of chemistry, a certain level of metallurgy, a certain level of physics. Absolutely. I'm not downplaying that. But you probably haven't drawn force diagrams or balanced equations. But we have, and we've done a lot of chemistry. What do we do when the player says, I know if I fill one tank with chemical A and one tank with chemical B, and I blast them out at the same time, and the wizard uses her cantrip to produce flame in front of it, we have a functioning flamethrower.
Right. Now, one, you can always flip the laws of physics because, well, it's a fantasy world. Or two, go, sure, let's go for that. But you don't necessarily know how to build a backflow mechanism. And so anytime you roll a 1, the whole tank goes off like a 8 dice fireball. With you at ground zero. You can always kind of kibitz and work around it and do those kind of things.
But aren't you afraid in that circumstance, though? You're just encouraging the player to sit down and better troubleshoot their modern brain engineering?
Well, you can be, because again, I'm going to hit this one from, I believe it was Dragon Magazine, where someone, oh my goodness, I really can't remember the details, but it was something like one of the classes or something, create object, and they were creating object to make an atomic bomb or something. Yeah, it was one of those that they went through the entire, it was like a mini essay about how to deal with this type of thing, and it's just one of those where you just talk to the player and say, okay, tell you what, rule of cool, let's do this once, but once, or, yeah, that's very great. I love the story of that, but it really doesn't fit the world. Or the gods intervene and go, ooh, time, 15-yard penalty. You have created this and this. No, this is going to have ramifications in the timeline. So they snatch that away and throw it aside. And
I hadn't thought about that, but now that I do, that sudden burst of inspiration where somebody goes, why don't I try combining these things and see what happens? A god could come along and go, yeah, that's going to mess up all kinds of plans. I'm just going to take the thing away and wipe it from your memory, because the alternative is I turn you into a salt pillar.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that raises questions. So, you don't want to deal. There was one I read, because there's the classic combination of portable hole and bag of holding in the arrow mechanism that you can use. The one I read, which I thought was very clever, was a ring of dispel magic, and then you take a pile of cannonballs and cast shrink on them and load those as the bullets with the ring at the barrel of the gun. Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. and the physics guy in me goes, okay, by all means, bring this on. I can't wait to see you use it in combat, because the law of conservation of momentum is going to kick in. So when that cannonball is going to do one of two things. It's going to be full mass when the shrink is dispelled.
Right.
Conservation of momentum says that mass times velocity is always conserved, which means if your mass jumps from 1/10 of a pound to 70 pounds, your speed is going to drop by a factor of 700.
Right.
So go for it.
Bullets through water. Very dangerous for like 8 feet.
Yeah.
But after 8 feet in water, bullets just kind of
They give it up.
Yeah.
And that, or just you just wait for the first time for an enemy spellcaster to go, I think they're using protection magic. Mass dispel. Oh, now your rogue's having fun.
Everything bursts because it's all cannonballs everywhere.
Yeah.
They're buried under a pile of cannonballs.
I wonder, I would actually call this the A-team rule. You ever notice they never maverick anything the same way twice?
Right.
Every episode, they come up with this brilliant plan, and they only execute it one time.
Right. Yeah. Why can't we make the cabbage cannon again in the next episode? Can we do that?
Yeah. Well, you don't get that neat build montage if they just go back to their playbook and say, why don't we do what we did? I think there may have been a later season where I think they did one throwback of, we can do what we've done in the past, with a twist. But yeah, I mean, that's another one you can use if you're into a game that is cinematic. You can use that maybe as a part of talking to the player to say, this is really cool. I'm glad you came up with it. Let's do it this week. But we understand that, like a good TV show, this is a one and done thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the tower is crumbling. Your monk is able to run down the debris of the tower until he can get to close enough to the ground to dive off and roll. And okay, once that's great. Let's rule of cool. Okay, never again.
But and it's weird though, because and this is something that I would encourage people that are running games to have good conversations with players, because there's nothing wrong if your game is fixated with encouraging players to think outside the box like this. So if you have built your game world and table around the homemade flamethrower, and you're like, no, they have a homemade flamethrower, I just have to adjust to it, then that's your game, and then you adjust to it. And that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. And then just kind of be aware, you also have to think as fast as your players do.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that you can make something fantastic like that. Again, I'll go back to my philosophy major DM. Philosophy, it wouldn't be a major if he's got the degree. I had a DM who had a master's degree in philosophy, and the thing is if someone is now in a medieval realm running around with a flamethrower, there will be powers within the realm that want said flamethrower or will want the flamethrower dead. And so then the machinations of the realm, if you have invented a Gatling gun in 1403, it's going to change the world. But it's going to change the world. And so now you are a focal point in this new world. People are going to try to buy your Gatling gun. People are going to try to steal your Gatling gun. People are going to try to kill you and take your Gatling gun.
People are going to try and fail to copy the Gatling gun.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So
yeah, that's a definite. And I think if your players, thinking in terms of like DM advice for the moment, if your players are pushing back against that, absolutely, I want to say I think it's The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And you see what happens when you go from a musket infantry to one facing repeating firearms.
Yes.
And they don't pull punches. It is brutal, and it is scary, and it is very well filmed. To show that the tragedy on the field when those moments happened, coupled with a certain amount of like some of the characters really look pained. Being on the gun side of it, going, this doesn't feel right. Our system of honor just changed because we want to win. So obviously we're going to keep using this, but what does it mean to win honorably when these are the weapons at our disposal?
Exactly.
And so it definitely becomes one where maybe it is a case where a group of wizards get together and just blow the sting up because they don't want the world to change that seriously.
So in I'll go to Harnmaster. In Harnmaster, you know, wizards, all real trained wizards, all go to specialized, watched over, you know, schools, and you are trained to be a X type wizard or whatever, and it's very regulated. And yes, the wizards police themselves because they know if there's witches and sorcerers and warlocks and stuff out there, it'll come back on them. So they try to police their own in that, and that's, I have seen and heard of people running their games like that. Like, okay, you are now a 5th level wizard, which means you enter the domain of blah blah blah, and you have to travel to a certain place to learn your new spells and to be, you know, to be ordained by the other chicanery or whatever, you know. So there's ways to work with it. Like, for instance, in my old campaign way back in 2nd edition, we were creating a world, and we wanted to introduce, because Barrier Peaks had come out, and that had spaceships and aliens and, you know, Vegapygmies and everything in it. And so we decided we were going to introduce into our homebrew world, we were going to introduce some alien races, because we were also playing sci-fi games and BattleTech and all that too. So we introduced some sci-fi races, some sci-fi tech, and we decided that the greatest city of wizards on the planet was actually built around a crashed spaceship. And that's where technology and magic and sending spells. Yeah, sending spells. Of course, you need the focus crystal to send your sending spells, not knowing that it's a communications crystal created by this superior alien race. And, you know, so you can do it all kinds of crazy ways. It's the whole 70s sci-fi and fantasy were much more tightly woven together.
Well, and that bridges really well with something I wanted to mention that came up in the chat. And so we're going back up the chat very quickly. Sure. I do want to acknowledge Third Tier shared the fun fact that the samurai who revolted were pardoned by the emperor a decade later, historically speaking, and with a gentle reminder too to remember that there is some problematic nature to The Last Samurai as a white savior movie. It is really, I would say, within the last 2 decades, Hollywood's starting to get on with the idea of you can have people of color headline movies and movies do just fine. Yes. And that was a hard fight to win. Dances with Wolves is another example of that. Hollywood wasn't ready to have a movie without like a Kevin Costner at the head of it, which is unfortunate.
The thing I'm going to give props to Last Samurai at the time, so gorgeous, so absolutely gorgeous. A samurai period film with that kind of budget had not been seen in a decade, since Kurosawa and, you know, Ran and some of the other movies that actually came out of China and Japan with big budgets. So I was happy for no other reason to see it. And I also did appreciate, you know, the white savior part. Yes, problematic, but I did appreciate that it was a teaching. It was a way to go, okay, this is an outsider and he's learning, just like Shogun was. And I can't remember the other Kevel book that was about China that was the same way. But if you really want to do a side note, if you really want to read a good massive book, it's called I think it's Story of the Heike. It is considered one of the first novels ever written, and it is from ancient Japan, and it's several generations of family, and it's massive. It's 2,000 pages or something like that, and it's really good if you like samurai and samurai history and whatnot. It follows this family, these two rival families through this period that's pre-Tokugawan.
Cool. Well, and the other point that came up with, speaking of the 70s, when we started gaming, if a player sat down at my table and said, we're talking now 80s and going into the 90s, if they sat down and said, I had this crazy idea. I want to build a trebuchet that we can carry on the back of a giant, or a half orc. And I figured it out. Like, I mathed it out. Like, they have a lift encumbrance up so he can hold the counterweight. And then we can use, like, under his arm, we can load it in and it'll work. And I know that my player did that.
Yeah.
Or at the least, his engineering uncle / dad, older brother, did it with them. Or older sibling, older sister, perhaps. That was their work. Nowadays, part of what sticks in my brain is I'm on the Dungeons and Dads Facebook group, and there's a guy who's constantly posting engineering schematics of check it out this time. And they range from anything from the 5-person death trap to a full schematic of how to use the principle of the portable hole explosion to fuel a rocket.
Right.
And they're cool and they're clever, but now it's like someone sits down at the table and says, hey, I have this idea.
Right.
It's like, did you? Or did you find this idea?
Right.
Because now I'm rewarding you. Now if you can break this part of the story, I'm rewarding you for doing a really good job living in the 21st century. And that, I think, it's changed a lot of this ingenuity, which is good.
Right.
In the sense of the internet has freed us to have better conversations, to grow and educate, but it really puts a spotlight on how long it took knowledge to disseminate just 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We're not even talking Middle Ages technology.
Yeah. For instance, it's really funny because it used to be kind of until the 2000s, it was kind of a thing where there's a series of comics. I think it was Dork Tower or whatever. The guy, the DM for the group in Dork Tower, he's at the bookstore or something, and he starts talking about medieval this and the line and spearmen and la 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 and tactics and all this, and people are like, oh my goodness, are you a history professor? No, gamer. I play D&D, and it's so interesting now how, when I was growing up, martial arts were not a thing. I mean, they were like, oh, maybe there was a Bruce Lee movie, but only weirdos saw that, or maybe someone might catch it on Kung Fu Saturday, early morning or whatever. And now it's just, waterbenders are doing snake form kung fu, and earthbenders are doing tiger, and they're using real kung fu in anime and fantasy, and it's fantastic. It's amazing to see. But yeah, the how fast things are acceptable and how fast ideas move definitely is that sort of it's kind of like giving a student an A on a book report. You're pretty sure that they downloaded off the internet.
Yeah, and I think that changes some of the calculus for the older gamers as to how much we want to say, I like that idea you had, let's do it next time, and remember, this is kind of a game breaker, so you get the one dramatic moment to try it. On the flip side, I also like things like the fact that when my players on my Sunday game back in our first mini campaign had the idea that, well, we're gonna douse the entire half the courtyard with wine, so when they come through, we'll ignite it. and they were like gung ho on this plan. It was a great, it's alcohol. Alcohol burns. Let's do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're due for a break anyways. Let's take a 5. Get some fresh water. Does wine burn? Oh, this will be fun. Okay. Exactly. And then they did the thing, and and I said, here's what happens. And they all kind of sat there, and I went, let me put something up in front of all of you. Let me share screen real quick. And they all went, oh.
Myself, I would have so gotten, I have a bottle of Klingon blood wine I would have pulled from the top shelf and uncorked and poured said glass and lit a match and went and watched them all go and it go and sizzle out and then laugh and laugh.
Yes. Also, wine is expensive. They had a plethora of wine, because the town they were in. This is a little bit wonky now. The town they were in was cursed with having a never-ending supply of good food and drink. It was part of the zombie curse that their physical needs were completely met. Yeah. So like they could take cheese out of a stock room and go have it with bread and some meats, and there would be a whole new wheel of cheese there when they went back into the stock room.
Neat.
So they never wanted for food, but that was part of there's a longer story as to how this was actually part of a curse on them, which meant they had lots of wine.
Right.
What they really needed was really, really good bourbon.
Exactly. Yeah.
That'll burn.
Again, I would not throw a match in a bottle of this. It would be a Molotov cocktail.
Well, and going down this tangent, we used to go camping over in Pinery in Ontario. It's down. It's on Lake Huron. It's a little tiny campground, provincial park, and they would have on Wednesday. It's what they call the Rum and Spirits Walk. And what would happen is it was a really well done story. This is a longer story. Buckle up, kids.
All right.
You'd show up for the Rum and Spirits Walk, and you'd be all sitting around. All of a sudden, you hear this bear roar in the distance, and a bang, and this old hunter in like late 1800s, early 1900s clothes would come out with a lantern, look at everybody, and then take off down the trail. Well, if you follow him, he leads you to this bonfire. Where the first thing out of his mouth is, I don't know what's up all you city slickers. I wouldn't be following no strange guy with a gun out to a bonfire, but since you're here. And over the course of the evening, spirits from the history of the park land come and talk to you about how they what their lives were like before they died. Nice. Which was, oh, hey, Floofy, which was really neat. They had a Native American girl who was part of the neutrals who controlled the flint in the area, so nobody wanted to make war with them because they had flint, so you can make knives. They had a woman that was a cook on a ship that was lost on Lake Huron storms, and the big one was the rum runner, because a big part of that area of Canada was really deep into running alcohol across Lake Huron into Michigan during Prohibition. And a big part of the show is they talk about the proper way to drink Sugar Beet Special, which is you fill your mouth with it, you swish it 3 times to the left, you swish it 3 times to the right, you swallow half, and you spit the other half out, which the guys do. They both get a good mouthful of Sugar Beet Special, which is probably 190 proof, and they and that flame is like 18 feet high. When they do it, it's like you can feel your eyebrows singe if you're in the front row. And then the show ends with him going, there's that bear I got to get. And he takes off running into the crowd because he thinks he sees it. And as you're looking over your shoulder, you get hit with flashlights because 3 park rangers come walking up the other side and say, what are you doing out here? You're not supposed to have a bonfire outside your campsite. The Rum and Spirits Walk got canceled. There was a possibility of rain tonight. I mean, I know there weren't clouds up, but it might have rained. What have y'all been doing out here? And it's the same show every week, and it's always amazing. And I love talking about it because it's the beauty of local production. Because if you're under the age of 13, you're like, this is the best thing ever.
Right.
And if you're over the age of 30, you're like, and I get all the jokes now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Use this as a story hook. Oh, good. That I'm glad I have to figure out how to use it as a story hook because it's such a neat. It was a really fun time, and it was a great way as a history nerd, a really great way to teach history.
Right.
That didn't get around the whole, like they got around the, here is someone from the American Revolution.
Right.
Well, how did they get here? He's just here. Like they really created a neat way to kind of give you that immersion. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it if you're ever over. Canadians seem to do a really good job with maintaining their provincial parks. So I'm just going to put that there.
There it is.
Also, and if you're American traveling in Canada and you see anything that says OPP, do not mess. They're kind of like the Mounties, but just in Ontario, and they do not mess with Americans. They will deport you before you blink. We've had it happen to friends and family. If you were Canadian, we'd be writing you a ticket for this, but you're not. So we're taking you to the border.
Oh, your name's Karen, eh? Well, get to the back of the car. Get towards the boot. Get to the boot of the car. We're gonna hands on the boot.
Yeah, it's a hoot and a half. So we started off last week about this time. Last week we started talking about pirate ships. And I think this gets to a big question. If you are designing your world, do you put cannons on ships in your D&D world?
Again, it part of it's that session 0. If we've decided that there's black powder and stuff, there may be a nation that has it. Or there may be, it may be magical. It may be, there is but one ship that has the dragon breathers, or the that type thing. Or it could be that so in my homebrew campaign, there are these dwarves who they're the sea dwarves. They are a clan of dwarves who found this area, these fjords, where there are great mineral veins in the fjords, in the rocks in the fjords, and they have built basically like Korean dragon ships. Okay, the Tokugawa period dragon ships, and they've built these dragon ships, and they have a steam cannon on board, and their technology is such that yes, they can use they have a different level of technology basically than the caravels and the ships of the line of other nations in the storyline. But if you have decided that there is black powder and you want to have cannons, you can have everything from simple gun wall deck guns that are cannons that are basically shotguns that are mounted, to 4-pounders that are inside the decking and such. I guess I would decide on the tech level, on a nation level, because if there's cannons, there's cannons on ship, there's cannons on the land. And so now technically there were cannons in the 14 and 1500s. So
they were siege weapons.
Yeah. So
although at that same time, and we're going to add on that Jackal agrees with you, cannons are a thing in their world. Limited access but available and expensive, which raises a different question. But to that point, cannons in the Middle Ages did exist, but they were usually outclassed by trebuchets and mangonels because the trebuchet was more reliable,
right,
and longer ranged. If you've ever seen a trebuchet in action, there's a dude in England has a full size trebuchet, and he does things like throws pianos out of them, and like I don't mean like a keyboard. I mean he takes one of those upright pianos, and it goes 300-400 yards.
Yeah,
and that's like not a small object.
Yeah.
So, and even Napoleon was talking about trebuchets during his period because, again, they were amazing siege weapons relative to a cannon.
Right.
Which kind of gets into a question I would put out of balancing the idea that if you're going to keep cannons in the game but make them expensive, it's almost like what captain it gets weird to me because what captain wants a cannon when they can have a fire mage throwing fireballs?
Well, and that's just it too, where, you know, we've joked for decades that, you know, the elves, they come out and they've got 5 guys who then, you know, put the wand on their shoulder like a law rocket and start firing fireballs out of the wand of fireball that they have, you know, or the lightning mages where they've got a cart with like 4 wands of lightning on it, and they wheel it out and point it when the, you know, the block of orcish, you know, horde is coming, and they fire all 4 wands of lightning and cut a 25-foot path through the, you know.
I think for me, I think I suffer from knowing too much because from where I'm at, I'd rather not, because it's hard for me not, because I also have to unthink of things like, wow, one good flame strike spell becomes the end of a ship. Because if that flame strike hits the powder magazine, that's the end of the ship. But maybe black powder in the D&D world, it isn't prone to spontaneous combustion.
Right.
I mean, not true spontaneous combustion because, you know, there's fire there, but it's like, it's not as unstable.
Right.
It only goes off when it's loaded in the cannon. It has to be prepped first.
Yeah.
So there are ways to get around that realism, but for me, it's like I so would rather not. It's like if I'm pitching a game, I'll pitch it as I really don't want you to have black powder guns or cannons or arquebuses for this particular game, unless everyone goes, oh, but we want to be the musketeers. And I'll briefly say, oh, so you all want to use rapiers and have witty repartee? And they'll go, no, we want to use muskets. And I'll go, all right, that's legit. I was hoping you didn't know that's what musketeer meant. Okay. Which, by the way, if you didn't know, the musketeers were actually known for the fact that they were like special trained troops to fight with the original muskets. Can't give a curse back that way. Interesting. Some people are anti-magic, then you balancing risk. That's true. And that's a good point Jackal brings up, is that balancing the lore of your world for how people feel about magic.
Right. And back to that session 0 type talk, you know, if it's going to be a thing, it's either going to be a one-time thing that breaks the rules, or we just keep it out, or it's accepted, you know.
Well, and I think it's fair that if you have a world, like from a world building point of view, and this will make a great show in the future about balancing forces within a world, and just to riff on some of the things we've seen happen. If you have a world where most people can't do magic,
right?
I'm even thinking Dragonlance was a very magic low world.
Yeah.
People are more prone to be inventive with technology,
right?
Because they want to be part of the cool crowd.
Yeah.
They want to at least keep the mages from having too much power. In a high magic world where almost anybody can decide at 7 or 8 that they want to start exploring magic as a way of life, or there's a large enough population, everybody has a sister or a cousin that's a wizard.
Right.
Maybe they weren't able to because DNA didn't work out that way, but they don't have to go far to find a wizard. That will change the impetus to do the research and to share the research, because I think, again, that thing that gets lost in just how important it is that we realize science is built on sharing of knowledge just as much as it is experimentation and writing things down. And 13, thank you for popping in and joining the club. And thank you for reminding us we are supposed to be hydrating through happy hour. An easy way to get yourself hungover is to not adequately hydrate with non-potent potables to balance the potent potables over the course of an evening.
Yeah, that was supposed to be hydration. So, you know.
I managed to get through an entire school year drinking literally out of a flask and never had any parent complain. That's my water flask, but still.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about balancing law versus chaos and let's see, norm out of fear-based. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that you can do when you set your campaign up to do that. In the avatar comments, the advancement of technology, non-benders are able to be more productive than benders. Yep. I think I've seen a little bit of that, and we watched a little bit of Legend of Korra, and you start to see some of that.
Yeah. The Jim Butcher series.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Any of them?
Not the Dresden Files. There's a 6-book series, and everyone has like bender type magic. They all have like a spirit animal, kind of like, there was a movie, The Golden Compass, or one of those where everybody had like an avatar type animal. Well, this series of books is like that, and hence there's not a lot of medicine and stuff, because you go to basically a water bender, you sit in a bathtub, and they manipulate the water in your body and around you to do healing and stuff. So the invention of things is stifled by the use of magic, and hence the kid who it grows up realizing he doesn't have any magic is like inventive as heck, because he can't just go and a fire starts.
Right. Or ask his sister to do it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is a lot of this technology and science, I think I'm going to keep beating this drum today. We take for granted the importance of communication. I mean, let's be honest. We have the internet because early scientists in the 60s said, we need a better way to share information with people. And the United States government, among with other governments, said, we're going to put money into that. Let's figure out a way to share information. And now we use it to share cat GIFs. But a lot of that idea of that ability to say, I have an idea, what do you think about it, and have instant feedback, as opposed to, I have an idea, I'm going to write something down, I'm going to have somebody print it, I'm going to have someone publish it, you're going to read it, and then you're going to sit down and write a response and go back. And that's exactly how I pronounced it. Back and forth and back and forth. We really have had, and we've seen an explosion, I think, in technology in the last 20 years because of the ubiquitousness of the internet.
Yeah. I mean, I often say, like if the girls ask me a question, I say, to the Google machine. And, we look it up.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing where I can give a half-baked, okay, yeah, I remember something about it. Or we can just look it up and be like, bam, there it is, know. So.
And that, again, I think that really changes the course of technological growth. Although, the next thing to bring up, if you look in any, like, rules as written player's handbook, there's the foundation for an internet. If a whole bunch of people wanted to, using player's handbook rules as written, they could have an internet.
Sending spells and such.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Summoning spells, all kinds of other good publication options. Yeah, we're having a bit of a debate about GIF in the.
I see that
in the chat. I've said GIFs since I first saw them. I probably will never stop. So good luck with that. And I believe the gentleman who wrote the first encoding algorithm for the format says GIF.
All right.
So we're going to go with that. So what have you got? Well, if you have other thoughts you want to add to this conversation, we welcome you to do so lots of places. oldtimertavern@gmail.com is one of the best places to email us an idea or a suggestion. You're welcome to join my Discord, and I can get you in touch with Graybeard through the Discord, so we can get chatting there. You can find either of us on Twitter, Graybeard Tavern or Lantern Noir. And we are happy to engage with you over there. Sometimes we remember on Monday to kick around what we're going to talk about on Tuesday, so we can kind of see what we're going to be talking about. And we really encourage you to be part of these conversations. We do this live on Twitch as our recording platform because we like to talk to you and get your ideas while we go. It makes it feel like we're hanging out at a happy hour, and random people have wandered up and said, I have a thought on that, and they add it in. And last but not least, as a member of the Inverse Genius family, you're also welcome to stop by the Inverse Genius Facebook group and throw some thoughts up there. Even if it's not related to our show, they're a great group of men and women who are just unified in their geekery. Speaking of geekery, Graybeard, next 7 days. Break it
Next
down.
7 days. Thursday, over at Indoor Adventures. We have our masks game. We'll see how Cody Johnson, a.k.a. Golden Gauntlet, how his story, technically because it's masks, and we've Indoor started the whole series with a kids group going on a tour and seeing these 4 statues of these 4 great heroes. So we're about to finish the beginning of their story in the next couple episodes over there, and that's always a good time. And then you can catch me Sunday 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Graybeard Tavern, and I play with toys and things, and we play games, and so right now we're playing Grifflands over there, so pop in at 10 a.m. 10 to noon, and we'll play there. And then you can catch me back here on Tuesday, where I warm this seat and drink my drink for happy hour.
And we talk about something D&D. I also am going to give a shout out. I missed the chance to push the button, but in the chat there's a shout out to Indoor Adventures. And the reason I do that is my Wednesday night game coming up tomorrow night. We are continuing with Dragon Heist, the Waterdeep adventure. Third Tier, who's our mod today, as well as Danae Keener of DanaeKeener.com. Both feature there, and you can find Danae Keener of DanaeKeener.com running a game on Indoor Adventures. So there's a really neat family network of gamers, DMs, and players all working together to make great content. And so if you're not coming over here and you're not hanging out with Graybeard, you should probably pop over there. You might see one of us. And if you don't see one of us, you'll see one of us adjacent in that space. So that's Wednesday night. We're going to continue with that. I'm probably doing generic gaming Friday and or Saturday. Not counting any afternoon streams I add to my schedule because I'm on summer vacation and I feel like I should be streaming more because I can and I want to. And the wife works, so what else am I going to do? But United Adventure Company thanks you for your knowledge and time. Well, we are happy to provide it. And then Sunday, we're returning to Curse of Strahd. We're moving into the next chapter. They're about to hit the winery. If you're at all familiar with the story arcs, that's where they're at. And that's a great group that I love gaming with. I just hope we finish it before Nebula gets to where she's going to be in October, because I think she's got a thing coming up that might take her out of streaming for a couple of months. So I'm really hoping we finish the game by October. And if you know anything about Curse of Strahd, you understand why I'm stressed that might not happen. I might have to put the gas pedal down with that group. And then I'll be back here again on Tuesday. So we'll see that. If you've given a follow, we appreciate that. If you're listening to the podcast edition, please consider leaving a review on your podcast platform of choice. It helps other people find this content, and it lets us know how we're doing. Are you enjoying this? Should we be making major changes? Should we just give it all up and go back to our day jobs? Which technically we're not missing for this because we wait for happy hour. So yeah, screw you. But please consider a kind review if you can. We really appreciate that. Until the next time we all get together, please absolutely stay safe. And for those of you who are here hanging out on Twitch, it is our honor and somewhat duty to send you somewhere as we wrap the show up, because sharing is indeed caring, unlike the coronavirus. And we want to be sure you have a chance to continue to enjoy your afternoon with some amazing peeps. So I'm going to take a quick peek to see who's currently on and doing stuff. Going down my list of follows. And I think I'm going to send you... Oh, hey, Momo. Welcome aboard. Another one of my players from Wednesday night.
Nice.
So lots of love to her. She had some amazing moments. That's not the button I was looking for. That's what I'm looking for. I'm thinking we are going to go hit up. Oh, good. Thank you for that.
Momo's a great name.
She's a great person. Let's see where to send y'all. I think we're gonna go. You know what? Let's go remind one friend of mine who's a lot of fun. If you like D&D stuff, you're gonna have a fun time hanging out. I'm gonna send you over to Night, who is an amazing content creator. She voice acts all of her retro gaming. She generally plays her way through. She's playing her way through different Legend of Zelda games.
Nice.
And she voice acts the entire time. So you can tell that she has a definite history with gaming. I've tried to get her to the gaming table, but her schedule is bat crap crazy. So that has not worked out for her. But I'm gonna see if I can snag her for a one shot coming up. So yes, Sweet. So give a follow to Pumpkin Days, give a follow to Third Tier, give a follow to Graybeard Tavern. When you're done giving all those follows, make sure you've hit all the bells so you know when we go live with all of our great content. Say hello to NLK for us when you get there. Please enjoy her show. She makes great content. I'm gonna go have some dinner. You're gonna go have some dinner. We're gonna be back here in a week. Until then, you know, guys, you know the drill.